coincided with another project, which was the Purdue University Conference on Romance Languages, Literatures, and Films. Those projects were born together, and when Howard was feeling bold and at that time, this was in 1988-9, when budgets were still very good, excellent in the universities. We had recently then hired someone from New Haven, Indiana, who is Deborah Starwich, and we needed help with our projects, and Howard actually assigned Deborah Starwich to Bordighera Press and to what's now become known as the RLA. And so the four of us have really been working together for since 1989. Along the way, because some of us moved, basically me, whatever, we've gotten help along the way. And the other, if you like the books you see, they're designed by two people, separately of course, but by two people. One, of course, is Deborah Starwich, who was with us from the beginning, and the second, I don't have my glasses on, and the lights are blinding me, and I don't see her, but I know she's here, is Lisa Cicchetti. And she's somewhere here.
Come on, Lisa, take a bow. Take a bow.
So when I moved to the Calandra Institute, you know, we do what we do, and we say, oh, by the way, there's this other thing I have I want to bring with me, and I need some help, et cetera, and so that was provided by then President James Meiskins.
Cut him off now.
And as things got busier along the way, we're at about 180 volumes, I think, or something to that effect. As things got busier along the way here at Calandra, we then hired another person who spends half of her time with Bordighera Press, and that's Rebecca Rizzo.
Hey, Rebecca.
Is...
Take a bow, Rebecca.
Come up to the door. Come up to the door. Because you're going to be helping selling books. Now, then we decided that we just couldn't do everything. We couldn't and we shouldn't. And that we had to do, there's a sense of legacy, you gotta pass it on. Gotta make sure that other people, you know, get involved. And so, along with the books, of course, we've had this journal, which continues, and by the way, you know, everyone should subscribe to VIA, and if you haven't, you can see me or Rebecca on the way out, and we'll even take your credit card, by the way. And so we decided that we needed to sort of pass it on to a new generation. And so we, not that she really had a choice because one of the founders is her supervisor, but we decided to invite Chiara Mazzucchelli to be the editor of VIA, and she's back there, Chiara.
Chiara, take a bow.
So these are, I don't think I've left anyone out. The only other two people that have to be recognized for their patience are two women who have followed this, one from the beginning and one almost from the beginning, only because I met her 2 years later. And that's my wife Maria and Rosa Giordano. Rosa was also ran the hotel that I stayed in for a few years in Chicago until I met Maria. And Fred ran the other hotel that I stayed in. So sofas and beds and whatever in basements. So, but this is sort of how, you know, it's evolved over the years. It's evolved. We believe it's here to stay. I don't, you know, we're here for a while. We believe it's here to stay. We need to think about passing it on to others. We need to look for, you know, 30 and 40-year-olds who are in certain positions where they can do it, and so that it adds, so it continues. And so one of the reasons why we decided to publish books was because I'm going to tell an anecdote, and then you guys, you know, can add in. But there were a couple of reasons. One was that, and I've told this to Robert, so it doesn't matter. Paul and Fred came back from a conference I didn't go to, and they said, "Oh, we heard this great poem by Robert Viscusi. Oh, it was great. And he even played it on piano." And it really was a great poem. But what had happened before that was that a very well-known American writer of Italian descent named John Tagliabue had sent us a bunch of poetry. And so we decided that from that day on, we would only publish so many pages of poetry. Well, that number was significantly inferior to what Bob's poem would have been. And I said, we just said no to John Tagliabue. We can't say yes to Robert Viscusi. And this is back in 1992, I think it was. So we decided to publish Viscusi's poem in a chapbook. And it was the beginning of Via Folios. I went and spoke to my Latin colleague, John Kirby, to make sure that we could use the term folios first now as a chapbook, which of course it made sense, but that it could later be used also, etymologically speaking, as a book. And John said, of course you can.
John.
And so we decided to call this series Via Folios, and that's really, that was one of the reasons. And then the other was, at around the same time, with a friend and a colleague of Paul's, who had a manuscript that a university press that shall remain nameless thought was wonderful. But it was too unconventional for an unknown critic to publish. And the report actually said, if this were Umberto Eco, I would recommend publication. And so we published that book for Wiley. It's called Humility's Deceits.
Yes.
And Wiley actually got tenure on that book. So it was great because early on, Bordighera Press had some power where somebody got tenure. And then the rest, we just decided that there were too many poets. You'll notice that the majority of our books are books of poetry. And that there were just too many poets who had really good manuscripts who weren't getting published because they were too Italian-American in thematics, but not enough gangster in thematics. And so here we are today. And so now, because the majority were poets, but this was really sort of serendipitous, we have, I hope we have all, is everybody here who signed up for poetry? Yeah. George?
They're not here.
Daniela?
Yeah.
Maria? Marisa? Al? Joanne? Joanne was here first. But Joanne, you're number 6, because this is a serendipitous order. Dennis? Stephen? Thank you. Is Luisa here? Luisa Villani? No. John is here. And then we will end with Annie. Annie, you're last on our scorecard, but number 1 in our heart. So I'm going to just call out your name. George, you're first, so you can start getting up. I'm going to call out your name. You can, if you want, you come up here. If you're short, you turn this down, speak into the microphone, so that we get it on tape. George, you're first.
Thank you. I was told to, like everyone else was told to read a poem of roughly sonnet length. Compression never having been one of my virtues, this was difficult. So I chose a poem that I don't often read, but I think is apropos. And I want to, thank Anthony and Fred and Paolo and everyone else involved with Bordighera for doing books like Low Italian, which was my first book of poems, which I don't think anybody else would have published, quite honestly. But I'm very proud of and happy that it exists. So thank you.
It was a bestseller for small press distribution.
Well, for 1 month it was. Sure it was. And I should say I'm thankful that I get to do another book, I think, with Bordighera next year, which is very nice and fun. So, if I can find the poem, there it is. This poem's called Personal References, and a lot of especially the early work with that Bordighera did, was focused a lot on identity, like a lot of ethnic writing is. It kind of like is a metamorphosis that I think ethnic writing goes through. It starts off with a lot of poems about identity, and then it kind of branches out this is a kind of a phenomenon of the last 20 or 30 years. So this is very much a poem about identity called Personal References. Almost all of them Italian. For variety's sake, I want to list a Scot. May we contact your references, an employer asks? Certainly. If they're not out admiring Baroque facades, if they're not out taking espresso, chocolate-dipped biscotti at sidewalk cafes, if they're not out strolling, whistling, hands behind their backs as they stare at dappled rivers, if they're not out stalking lovers' apartments like disrobed monarchs, if their minds and hearts aren't so engaged, they may tell you who I am.
Bravo. I know all the references.